Hello and welcome to a special Halloween edition of Establish the Show, aka the Kama Sutra Show. I am your host, Jerry. As always, I am joined by Gardner Minshew. I am joined by Evan Walters. Let's start with Gardner Minshew. He's on a bye this week, taking some time away from the sex to join the show. Gardner, what's going on, buddy?
Yeah, the talk of my demise has been much exaggerated. I'm going to get healthy over the bye. I'm going to come back and we're going to start winning some football games.
Evan Walters, what's going on?
Guys, I know you guys think that you dressed up, but Wiggins and Adam, you guys look like the same as you always do. Wiggins, I guess, usually don't wear sunglasses, but, otherwise you look the same. And fucking Levitan has been dressing like this for the last half decade on Halloween, so we've all seen it. Plus, I got the best outfit this week. Like a fucking King Henry.
Oh, baby.
It's going to be an explicit show. Let's go. Let's go.
We will talk about the big dog. I think the big dog is very much in play for cash, obviously. And we are, speaking of shirts, I'm sure you guys saw some of the tweets that we had, though, working on getting some shirts out for you guys. We're not going to try to make any money, really, off the shirts. We're out there for you guys to hopefully have some fun with it and trigger the boomers with run the damn ball stuff. Anyways, we have a lot to talk about today because this is a very tricky slate. We tweeted the injury report, and God, there are so many injuries to look at. I hope you guys saw the tweet, but the bottom line is that we have most or all of the information outside of the Seattle running back stuff. So we have it all. So we're in pretty good shape there. The other thing that is just confusing people, and man, I'm so tired of talking about weather, but we always say that wind is our biggest concern. And with that in mind, there's 5 wind games this week. And so here are the 5 wind games. The worst looks like it's going to be New England, Buffalo, and also Las Vegas, Cleveland. And then maybe medium wind is going to be Minnesota, Green Bay. And then on the border of affecting games, I think will be Tennessee, Cincy, and New Orleans, Chicago. Now, we will have Chris Allen, who is a weather expert and has studied like the way stadiums are built and how they affect wind inside stadiums, which I think is actually what matters. All these weather reports come from outside the stadium. I remember the one time there was a report there was of 25-mile-an-hour sustained winds in Philadelphia. I live 1 mile from the stadium. I walk outside, there's not even a breeze in the sky. So I take all these weather reports with a grain of salt. I think Chris will have a better handle on it. He will be joining Dink and Leone for a portion of Establish the Million tomorrow morning. You guys can always catch a replay on that. But we're not going to spend a ton of time on weather on this show. We are going to note it for New England, Buffalo, for Las Vegas, Cleveland, for Minnesota, Green Bay. And we are going to let others kind of overreact, especially in tournaments where people are going to overreact massively and won't be able to take advantage. So that's my take on the weather. Wiggins, do you want to chime in with any weather takes before we get going here?
Yeah, I'm not worrying about it too much right now. We'll see what it looks like Sunday morning. I think I look at it more for maybe bumping up some defensive matchup. If I'm looking for what defense to play, like Chicago's not really rating all that well, but you've got the Saints on the road, bad weather, windy. So that's one I'm looking at. But yeah, I'd say just don't worry about it too much right now, and we'll deal with it on Sunday morning.
Yeah, and there weren't a lot of guys in play necessarily in New England, Buffalo anyways. I do think Josh Allen's ability to run kind of mitigates some of his downside from the wind there. I did think that Las Vegas, Cleveland had some plays. But anyways, we'll talk about that as we get through the plays here. And let's start at the quarterback position. And as always this season, it seems Russ Wilson starts the conversation. The pricing came out before Russ's game, and he is still underpriced, I think, at least, even at elevated tags, 7,800, 8,700. People are fearful of San Francisco's defense. I'm not sure that it really matters against Russ as much. As Evan noted, the 49ers have been giving up plenty of rushing yards, and we could see an elevated rush yard game here. Evan, how do you think this raw matchup is for Russ? Because people are going to say, oh, San Francisco defense, one of the best defensive lines in the league. This is a spot where Russ could maybe fail. What do you think?
No, and San Francisco has been good against the run. Number one. Number two, the schedule of quarterbacks that they face, as I outlined in matchups this week, has been one of the softest in the league. So I wouldn't take a whole lot away from their defensive performance so far. Richard Sherman is not back. Also on the other side, Seattle is going to be without their top corner, Shaquille Griffin, without their slot corner, Ugo Amadi, and probably without Jamal Adams, who only had one limited practice all week, listed as questionable. So, and I think that can affect just the way that the two offenses interact, from like a total standpoint, from, a shootout standpoint. I think that the 49ers are going to have success throwing the ball against Seattle. Almost every team has. And the 49ers passing game has looked good. Even without Deebo Samuel, I think that Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Kendrick Bourne, to a lesser extent, these guys can get it done against Seattle, especially with those big losses in the secondary. The Seahawks have not been able to rush the passer. Now you're stripping away their secondary talent. They are ripe for the picking for Kyle Shanahan passing attack.
Yeah, and one thing I would say about Russ, too, and we talked about this last week with Joe Burrow, when you remove Chris Carson, who's questionable, when you remove Carlos Hyde, who's doubtful, you can start to get even more elevated pass attempts for Russ, even though he's already leading the league by a wide margin in passing rate above expectation. But, I don't know how many times they want to hand the ball to Travis Homer and DJ Dallas if it comes down to that. And so it definitely should be a let Russ cook spot. He is, however, very expensive, Wiggins, and Russ, Lockett, Metcalf stacks are all going to be very expensive on a week where, unless you want to punt it off with some Jets guys, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, you're going to be struggling for pricing, at least on DraftKings. I haven't looked at FanDuel as much. You can comment more on that. But how do you think Russ fits price-wise, especially with his expensive receivers?
Yeah, I mean, you can get him if you want him, and it's hard to fault that. He's been so good. And that game, it's going to be a good environment. I heard an interesting stat earlier today that over the last 2 years of all the games that Seattle's played, of all the ones they've won, they've only won 4, I think, of the last 20 out of more than a touchdown. So they just don't put teams away. It's a back and forth game with them a lot. I'm expecting that. I like them both. I mean, the problem with Russ is you can get down to Jimmy for some serious savings. So I think I'm leaning towards Jimmy right now. But I mean, you can drop off. There's plays you can get away from, and you can afford Russ. So yeah, we'll talk more about tight end, how comfortable we are going down to some of the cheap guys at tight end and some of these wide receivers. So I think for me, I want to see what you guys have to say about these cheap plays, and it depends how comfortable I am with them.
Yeah,
Jimmy, $200 more expensive than Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up Jimmy, and the amount of plays per game Seattle is allowing is just outrageous. 76 plays per game. They've only had one overtime game, but that's like historic. Like nobody runs 76 plays against the opponent. It's outrageous. Now, Jimmy doesn't give you the rushing upside that other quarterbacks do. He won't have Deebo Samuel, one of the best yak guys in the entire league. As Evan mentioned, he still has Kittle. He still has Ayuk. They have Kendrick Bourne for red zone work. We'll see what they have at running back. They may get Tevin Coleman back, which I don't think wouldn't be as great for Garoppolo. I'd rather him have McKinnon out there, but McKinnon has quote unquote tired legs. So we'll see on that. But anyways, you couldn't paint a better spot for Jimmy G. I think he will be very popular because, as Evan said, he's only 5,400. Like he's down there with the worst of the worst at quarterbacks in the best possible spot. I do think that Jimmy always has passed bad games. Like it just can happen. It's just Seattle. Their offense is so good. It's hard for me to see Jimmy showing up with less than 25 or 30 attempts here. And at 5,400, it's hard to not see him not getting it done there. So Jimmy, from a value perspective, is projecting as our best quarterback on DraftKings. Evan, it sounds like you like Jimmy a lot here.
Yeah, and Seattle's just a massive pass funnel. They're pretty good against the run. And I think that from Jimmy's standpoint, you almost want Tevin Coleman to play because he's very likely to have be hyper inefficient, like 7 carries for 9 yards, and then they just have to resort to the pass. So I think that actually Tevin out there would be a boon to Jimmy Garoppolo. But I wouldn't say that he's a safe floor guy. But I do think that he's got pretty good upside, and he's probably got a pretty solid mean projection as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think his floor is actually elevated here just because of the way Seattle's offense plays, that we're going to see. The way Jimmy fails a lot of times is like they just run and score defensive touchdowns, and that's it. I don't see that happening here. All right. The guys, I don't see many guys that are better plays than Russ or Jimmy. I think it's pretty clear cut. I think my favorite guy to beat them might be Josh Allen here, and that might be a rough take with the weather and with the Patriots. I think it's either Josh Allen or Burrow for me, and maybe Tannehill I'd throw in the mix there too. Those would be some of my favorite GPP guys. Wiggins, why don't you take us through some of the guys away from Russ and Jimmy?
Well, I think in cash, for me, it's either Russ or Jimmy. And then it just comes down to how comfortable we are with the other positions. Like I was saying, outside of that, for tournaments, yeah, Burrow, I think, is really nice. Tannehill on both sides, especially if Derrick Henry ends up catching ownership. I don't think people are going to play Tannehill or AJ Brown. John will be owned a little bit, but you can have a nice pivot off of the big dog there. The guy I wanted to ask you guys about was Lamar Jackson. I understand they're up against Pittsburgh, which is an incredibly good defense, but he's coming off a bye, should be healthy now. His price is down. He hasn't been getting it done, but man, he looks like a good tournament play to me. What do you think about him, Evan?
I think that he's a great tournament play just because of the style of player that he is. And we saw him have an explosive rushing game in his game before the bye. Then he had the bye to rest that knee, which was sort of ailing him. Nothing from a matchup standpoint, I think, really points to him as a particularly great play. Like, his receivers aren't really in great spots. Although I think that Marquise Brown is a little bit interesting because the Steelers have very few weaknesses on defense, but one of the weaknesses that they do have, if you're to shine a microscope on them, would be that they have a tendency to give up some big plays in the passing game, and Marquise Brown would be, sort of the go-to expectation player for that. So, and I also, 46.5 on the total, like, it's just so easy to like surpass totals like that in the NFL. And so I've bet the over myself on this game. This is not a win game, right?
Correct. Should be good weather for that game.
Yeah, should be good weather. I mean, and look, at the end of the day, like, we respect both of these defenses, but we also respect both of the offenses. And at the end of the day, offenses win out against defenses in the NFL when push comes to shove. So I feel like Lamar is going to be really, really low owned. And probably Marquise Brown will be as well. And they're probably in better spots than a lot of, peripheral indications suggest.
Yeah. And I think on FanDuel specifically, you can get Marquise Brown very cheap. On DraftKings, he's costs a little bit more to be part of that stack. Let's talk about the Cincy Tennessee game. And, Brandon highlighted it in his article. I've been talking about, I think it's out there on the radar now that this Cincinnati offensive line situation is a major, major problem. Left tackle, right tackle, and center all got hurt last week. All will miss this week. They already had a bad offensive line. I mean, God knows what their backups look like. I think Joe Burrow called them one of the worst offensive line units in the history of the NFL. How much do we think that affects Joe Burrow here, Evan? Because Tennessee hasn't had the best pass rush. But God, I don't know what this means for Burrow, because I like, in generally speaking, and now we have offensive line and weather, but in a vacuum, I do like this spot for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, we talked about this all the way back on Tuesday, and it was one of the first games that I wrote up of the week, and I really, really liked it on paper until I started to, dig into the Bengals' offensive line injuries. They're going to be without Jonah Williams, Trey Hopkins, their center. Those are probably their best two offensive linemen. And then Bobby Hart, he stinks anyways. So I would say they're without two critical offensive linemen on an already awful offensive line. But at the same time, they are facing the Titans' pass rush bereft defense, which I know Jadeveon Clowney did not practice on Wednesday or Thursday. Do we know if Jadeveon Clowney is going to play this week?
I think so, but I would have to confirm, but I think so, yes.
All right. I still think Burrow's going to get the attempts off. And they're going to play fast, and the Titans have been playing fast. And I think I think that the Titans are going to score a lot of points.
Right.
And I think the Bengals, even if it's like if the Titans put up let's say 35, I think that the Bengals can still put up 20 or 24. And, we can kind of get there with some Bengals guys. It's a really, really interesting game. There's also the win factor. So I don't know. It's a tough one for me to break down.
Yeah, I still like Burrow, and leads the NFL in dropbacks. And with Joe Mixon out and Gio Bernard starting, Gio Bernard is their clear pass down back. It leads to even better scripts for Joe Burrow. And then he has three really good wide receivers. AJ Green looks like he has head on straight again. And obviously T Higgins is a baller, and Tyler Boyd is a very, very, very good player and a very, very good matchup. So I still like Burrow plenty, and I like Tannehill on the other side. So yeah, I think those are kind of clear pivots. The one guy we haven't talked about yet, Wiggins, is Patrick Mahomes. And people are, I think, going to warm to Patrick Mahomes as they talk themselves in more to some of these Jets guys. We know Crowder's out and we know Perriman's out. So then people start thinking, what kind of stacks can I make? Oh, I can make Chiefs stacks with Mims, with Berrios or something like that. So I think the Mahomes stuff is going to get a little bit more popular. We just pushed a fresh ownership update. I gave Mahomes a little bit of a bump. I gave Tyreek Hill a little bit of a bump, but I still think people are going to be somewhat afraid of this 20-point spread.